Okay, so I'm doing a little behind the scenes here. I'm dyeing some papers for my next project, my tainted paper Patreon page, where we'll be resurfacing, doing eco dyeing, all kinds of a variety of papers we're going to resurface to use in our journal, hence the name Tainted Paper. So I'm doing two types of dyes here. Over here I've got my coffee stained paper, and you know, I got up this morning taking the kids to school, and my coffee pot had some leftover coffee from yesterday. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to throw it out. So I thought, oh, I'm just going to grab some copy paper and then also some coffee filters, because I'm going to end up making pages out of this. And then I just put some copy paper in a tin and I poured it all over. And then I had a little bit of this instant coffee left, so I added some water to it and just kind of dribbled it over. And so I've got the filters on top, I've got copy paper underneath, and then I also stuck some filters between the pages. So some papers are going to be, obviously the coffee filters end up soaking up more of the coffee, but I let it sit. It's been sitting for about an hour, and everyone's going to be a little bit different. So I didn't fill it like a bath. I just kind of dumped what was left, and it was probably about four cups of coffee in this tin, so it really absorbed it. Then the interesting thing is I was doing that, and my son, who's 10, looked at me and said, hey, you know what, Mom? You could try using Papa's Coke, because I had my parents over for the holidays, and my dad likes Coca-Cola, and there was some left over, and we don't drink pop. So he says, oh, you could use Papa's Coke and dye some paper with it, because it's got the same color, and we're not going to drink it. And I thought, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. I'm going to try that. So in this pan, I added 2 little mini cans of Coke, but then I also added a little bit of this 100% cranberry juice. It's that non-diluted, very saturated cranberry juice. Just a little bit kind of trickled on top. And then I wanted to get a little more of that, like a reddish tint. So I literally cut slices of beet, and I made some, almost like stamped some of the papers in between. So you can see a little bit of that red coming through. And then again, I just kind of let it soak while I was out, while I dropped them off, and now I'm back. So what I'm going to do now is just drain the excess water, and I'm going to stick it in my oven for just to dry out the pages. So I'm going to dump the water. I am kind of doing this by hand, so you'll see in a second once I get it to the stage. There's not much water left. Like I said, I didn't saturate it. I just used about 4 to 5 cups of water, so it really soaked up in the paper. So let's get that in the oven, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so I've got my oven at 250, and I've got 3 racks in there, and I literally just took the piles of paper and I shoved them on the rack without a tray or anything underneath. And the ones that had the beets, I just left them on there because I'm hoping that it'll do a little bit of dyeing, a little more dyeing while it's in there drying. So I'm going to let that sit, and I'll start peeling pages off as they dry. So we'll close that up. Again, it's at 200, and we just have to wait. Keep an eye on it. You know, every 5 minutes or so, just check and peel the top layers off. Okay, so I'm covering my entire kitchen island with masking paper. That just, you know, the masking paper you get at the hardware store. And this is what I'm going to, and have 2 different colors here because I'm going to end up using these papers as well. later because we're going to get some dribbles of coffee and dye on it as well. So you want to lay your whole counter with paper. You can use anything. You can use paper towel, newspaper, you know, paper shopping bags, tear them up and lay them down. And don't discard it after, because you're going to want to use those as well. So I'm going to get this laid out, and then once we start getting stuff out of the oven, I'll show you what we do next. Okay, I'm going to start pulling a couple of these off. It is pretty wet. I probably should have laid them on here first. So I'm going to grab some. This one's getting dried up and it's looking good. These are the coffee filters. And so before you put it in the oven, because this is the mistake I made, you're going to want to lay them on the paper towel just to soak up that extra moisture. You don't have to. If you have patience and you want to sit around waiting, then you can certainly do so. So I'm going to lay some out, and I'm just going to kind of let the rest of the paper do its thing in the oven, and we'll show you what to do next. Okay, so I've got some dried pieces here. Look how pretty that is. I'm just going to lay it out on my counter. You can see where the beets were with the little red stains. These are the coffee filters. So I'm taking those out. Let's see. Some of them have still a little bit of wetness, but I'm just going to let those air dry. And the nice thing is, I live in Arizona. If it was summer, I'd just lay these out in the sun to dry, but it's way too cold right now. So still working on it, just leaving the stuff in the oven for a little bit until the sheets dry, so you can kind of peel the top layer off and lay them on the counter as they dry. Hey guys, okay, so I took some packs out and I just want you to see the really neat designs that they ended up making. Now this is one that had the coffee filters on the paper, so the pattern ended up coming through, which is really nice. This is the Coke and cranberry stained paper. Look how nice that turned out. And this was the coffee stain, and you can see the grill marks that are really cool on that paper. So I'm just going to lay them flat, and then what I've done, because they are still a little wet, is I put some thinner pieces of paper right on the grill here, and you can turn it. Look how nice that ends up. You can see the grill marks, and I'm going to put some this way so that, look at this. It's so cool how you end up getting the grill marks on the paper. So you can turn your papers different ways. I'm going to stick a couple more in here. This is ones that were stained by the beets. Put them on an angle. And if you want to get some crisscross marks, you can just keep rotating your papers to get different textures. I'm going to turn this one. This one ended up being nice too. This was on the bottom. This is the Coke stained one. I'm liking how that turned out. So I'm just going to lay that down to dry. There's all my neat papers so far. And then it's just really neat when you have these. I'm going to leave that on, the coffee filter on, and put it back in because I want that one to end up transferring the coffee stain. But look at this, how I can end up doing different patterns just using the grill marks of the oven. And I'm going to put it back in just to get a couple going a different way as well. because I like that look. Okay, I'm going to put this one back in. And then we'll just shut the oven and let it sit for another few minutes. Here are some other papers, some more coffee filters that I did. And I love this kind of burnt look. I left that in the oven a little longer. And I'll end up opening these up. I'll use some for pockets, but I'm going to make all kinds of pages with these. So far this is what we've got. But isn't that neat? The Coke stain, cranberry, and beet over here. And then this was the coffee stain. And if you just lay the coffee filters between the pages when you're putting the coffee in, you'll get these neat kind of designs. I thought that ended up so cool, so I'm so excited. So I'll keep you updated. I'm just gonna continue doing the process. And then when I have them all out, I'll just videotape them out, because I think you guys get the idea now, just kind of, you know, laying sheets right onto the grill so you can get those marks like this, the stripes. And you can actually, if I wanted to add more stripes, I would just kind of move it over a bit so that you can get more stripes in between. So just experiment. This is what I've got so far. I'll keep you guys posted. Okay, so on some of the pages, I just put tea bags between the pages. And so I put the tea bags, I wet the paper with coffee, and then I put more paper on top. And this is the effect I got, which is, and they're not completely dry yet, so they will change a bit, but you get the little stained areas where the tea bags were. And in here you get the impression of the tea bag, which is so cool. And I'm going to end up using the tea bags too to make pockets and tags and that kind of thing. But I think there's another one down here. Let me just reveal. Okay, so then there's one side of the tea bag stained, and then here's the other one. And then when I just lift the tea bags up, that's the effect you get. There's so many different ways to get a variety of patterns and textures in your eco-dyed papers. So I just wanted to show you a couple there as well. Okay, so I just took some of the Coke and beet papers out, and there's some nice color on the paper, and it is subtle, so it's still a little bit damp. You don't get as much as a distressed kind of coffee look as the coffee. I want to show you some that I've already dried. So this is the Coke and beet paper. But I mean, you get some really pretty designs on it. And what I did with some of the leftover coffee is I kind of just dribbled some little drops on it, so it gave it a little extra texture. But everyone turns out different. And if you've got papers, those are the dried ones, at the bottom or at the top soaking, you're going to get more color. And then these are the coffee and tea stained ones. So in comparison, of course, you're going to get a darker tone with the coffee and tea, but this still is really nice. It's, you know, it's more subtle, but it makes for an interesting design. And then when we get the books all together, it's going to really look neat. You can do a lot of things. So, like I mentioned, I just I left the beet on it when I put it in the oven, and it just ends up making a design. And what you can do is, if the pages are still damp, just take your beet and put it between a page and close it up and just put it back in the oven. That's what I'm going to do now. And then, you know, whatever's liquid is left in that beet, it's going to transfer onto that paper. So I'm just going to stick it back in the oven for a bit and let that dry a little bit more. I still have some papers. These ones are dry in here. Oh, these ones in the middle are dry too. So take those out. And these were the Coke stained ones that didn't have any beets on them directly. So you still get, oh no, these are the coffee and tea stained. Look, I can see the tea right there. All right. Okay, so my last batch of papers came out. This is what we did today. These are coffee and tea stained papers at the bottom. As you can see, just from one batch of eco dyeing, we've come up with, you know, a variety of textures and colors ranging from dark to lighter. And then this was my Coke and Beet paper. And you can see I did get about 2 ripped ones, so that's pretty good out of the batch. But it's neat because you can see the design that came out. And they are a little more subtle. Some came out a little darker. This was one of the top layers. So if you want it darker like this one, just, you know, soak it a little longer. I didn't soak mine very long, but, you know, it's neat. You get a lot of different textures and designs, and of course you've got the beet prints on it, which is nice. So those are all them. And then we did a bunch of coffee filters, and these really turned out nice. I love the way these turned out with the textures. So I'm going to end up sewing these together to make pages. And then I also did this type of coffee filter as well. And I like how some of them turned out looking really burnt. And then my tea bags. And the other thing that I wanted to share with you is when you're making your coffee in the morning, this is what I started doing. It's going to take me a while though, is I keep my coffee filters. So this is right out of my coffee pot. Now the first one I did, I rinsed all the greens off, and then I found it didn't really stain well. So I decided to try just taking it out. I just kind of like take the grains off it in the garbage can and just leave it to air dry. And then if there's a little bit of dust left, you can just dust it off. But it just ended up turning out so much nicer. Like you get more of the coffee steam there. So start, you know, hang on to your coffee bags, hang on to your tea bags. I'm going to end up emptying these out and turning them into little pockets. So just, you know, keep all these goodies, let them dry out, and they'll become very useful in your journal. So hope you enjoyed this coffee tea, Coke and Beet stained little tutorial. And, you know, if you want some ideas on how you can incorporate these pages into your journal and see some creative journal constructions, make sure you join me on Patreon at patreon.com/Yvette St.Amant and sign up for the Tainted Paper tier, and you'll get not only tutorials on how to use these papers in book constructions, but I'll give you loads of free downloads, and I'm going to scan some of these papers so that they'll be accessible for you guys. If you don't want to get in your kitchen and start eco-dyeing, you'll have these available, and that'll just be part of the tier, is you'll get that included with the membership. So go check me out over there, and I'll see you guys soon.